All, welcome to the web application pen testing class on Pentester Academy. Now in this video we will talk about HTTP basic authentication. Now before we move on, I'd like to first visit HTTP response codes. Now in the previous video we looked at how you can make HTTP requests using various methods like get, put, head, post, etc. Now for any request which you make, the server responds back with a response code and any response body such as an HTML file or probably a redirect or whatever it might be with it. So briefly, if I were to summarize, any response code in the range 1xx is informational, 2xx is really request successful. As an example, the 200 OK, which we have seen a lot of times. In the 3xx region is typically redirects. So if you notice, if you've done any of the web application challenges, you may have seen the 302 moved temporarily redirect. In the 4xx range, what it means is typically the client has done some error in the request. As an example, in HTTP basic authentication, you will see there is a 401 unauthorized, which is you're unauthorized to access this resource and you're not providing credentials as required. And finally, 5xx, which is error on the server side. Probably you sent an input the server could not process, or at times if there is poor error handling on the server side, let's say a database connectivity code fails and the developer does not handle that exception correctly, then there could be an unhandled exception which could lead to a 500 server error. Okay, so now let's move on to authentication in HTTP. Now purely at the HTTP protocol level, there are only two kinds of authentication supported. The first is basic authentication and the other is digest authentication. Now it's important to note that other kinds of auth such as forum based or Windows based authentication or OpenID and things like that are not part of the HTTP standard, right? These are all stuff which has been built on top of application frameworks and things like that. So to keep it very, very simple, HTTP authentication is only basic and digest. Now, in this video, let's explore how basic authentication works. It's really very simple. The client in step one requests for a protected resource, let's say /admin or /secret or /members, and the server goes ahead and makes a request for username and password. So the server tells you this is a protected resource and you need to provide credentials in order to be able to access it. Now the client sends the username password, and if this matches what the server has in its database, you are granted access to that resource. If not, typically in the case of HTTP basic auth, it would just reprompt you once again for a valid username and password. I think many of you may have encountered this little box which says auth required, which typically how basic authentication looks like. Now let's try and understand basic auth in a little more in-depth way by using Wireshark. Now the application I will use is a challenge application which I have posted in the web applications challenges section, going by the title HTTP basic authentication attack level easy. So let me go into my backtrack machine, and this is how the auth page looks like. And if we go ahead and try to click enter Pentester Academy, we are prompted for an authentication, and it basically says Pain Games 1.0. And if you enter something such as Nick admin, if it is probably not the right credentials, you would just be prompted for it once again, right? And a lot of clients may just eventually kind of time out and show you the unauthorized page. This unauthorized page is customizable by the developer. So you may see different kinds of pages. This is not really one set looking page. Now, how does this work internally, right? So let me give you an example. Let's go ahead and open up Wireshark so that we can actually see the network traffic and understand basic authentication at a very low level. So let's wait for Wireshark to open. And I'm going to select ETH0 or whichever network interface you may be using. I'm going to go ahead and start sniffing. And I'm going to type in a filter for HTTP. Go back to Pentester Academy. I'm going to click on enter Pentester Academy. I get the prompt. Let's say I type in Vivek and let's say Pentester Academy. Hit an enter, get back the same prompt, which is absolutely fine. And if you notice here, we can clearly see our basic auth process starting. So we go ahead and we seem to make a request for this specific resource, and the server seems to be responding back with a request for basic authentication. And this is done by adding a new HTTP header called www-authenticate. And in that, it tells us this is basic authentication and the realm is Pain Games 1.0. The realm is customizable by the web admin or by the application developer, right? Now, when our browser receives this, that is when it shows you the little prompt. And if you notice, the response code is 401 unauthorized, right? And that tells the browser that really, the response basically is guiding it to request for a username and password, which it needs to send over a basic authentication protocol. Now the client responds back, and of course this response is what we've responded. And the response goes back in the authorization header, which says authorization, this is basic. And then you have a string which looks pretty random, right? Where did Vivek and Pentester Academy disappear? Now this string is actually derived from Vivek and Pentester Academy, which are the credentials, separated by a colon, right? And this string has been base 64 encoded. Now, if you've never ever heard of base 64 encoding, the best place to go really is Wikipedia. And in very simple terms, as they've already written, it's a simple binary to text encoding schema, which uses a table to convert 3 octets into 4 encoded characters using this specific table. And there are conditions for padding and stuff like that as well, right? You can go ahead and have a look at it. The good news is there are ample online tools available to do base 64 encoding and decoding in case you land up getting such a string. And for people who are developers, I know I have a Python class in here as well in Pentester Academy. So you could just go into Python and you could actually import a module which is called base 64. And then if you wanted to encode, you could just do a base 64 dot encode string. Give it the string, let's say Vivek colon Pentester Academy. Strip it because a /n is automatically added. So you have Vivek Pentester Academy, and there you go. This is the base 64 encoded string, right? DML 2Z blah blah blah, which is exactly what you see in here, right? DML 2Z blah 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 ends in TEQ equals equals, ends in TEQ equals equals, right? So this is how you can even use Python if you are also taking the Python videos which are already there in Pentester Academy, right? So once the server receives this, if this was the right credential, then the server would allow access. If not, it would again send back the 401 unauthorized and reprompt for the password, right? So now let's go ahead and enter the right password. Let me stop sniffing for a second. And let me also quickly search for the right password, because it looks like I forgotten what the right password was. So just give me one quick second. While generating all of these challenges, a lot of times, I end up forgetting what the username and password was. Of course, as a solution to the challenge, I'm also going ahead and breaking this in one of the solution videos, which you can have a look at. But let me just quickly pause the video for a second rather than having you guys wait. Okay, we are back. So let me restart the sniffing. Go back in here. This time let me put in admin AADDD, hit an OK, and it says challenge cracked. Go back in here, and now what we see that based on what we had centered in the authorization header, which is this field in here, admin AADDD, the server responds back with a 200 OK. You can clearly see that in here. And the 200 OK, of course, consists of the HTML page where basically it congratulates us, right, that we have gone ahead and cracked the challenge, right? Fantastic. So this is how basic authentication works. If you're more curious, you can look at base 64 and how it works, etc. Or you can use one of the online services which I pointed you to in case you ever need to decode a string. Though most of the tools we will encounter excuse me, during this course have capability to decode base 64 and encode it automatically. In the next video, we will look at how we can launch different attacks to break a basic authentication prompt. So that's all for this video, guys. Thank you.